This is Masechta Shabbos, Daf Lamed Zayin. We were talking about what you do to certain objects to make them not muksa on Shabbos. So we're proving that all you have to do is designate the reeds of something when you want to sit on it, because if you have to tie it down to the fact that the thorns, it'll be too much work. If you say the rule is that branches that are muksa, that until one ties all the thorns, ain masa gadol mizeh, there's no greater masa in this. So you can say that they can never be used until that. So then they can never be used because that's really the greatest work you could do. And when it doesn't need muksa, you don't need to work that hard. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi b'shem Rabbi Yonasan. Lielam adi al yimne adam atzma melech lebeis medrash. A person should not withhold himself from going to his base medrash. Sharei kama pa'amim noishala halacha zu b'Yavne. For a following question was asked numerous times in Yavne. Arei vasa Yardin. So you have a barge that goes on the Yardin River, the Jordan. Lamahi Tameya. Why is that makabel tama? So no one is able to say anything. Ad sheba Rabbi Chanina ben Antignas, v'darsha b'irai, and he was able to darshan on it in the city. That areva sayardin lamahit tameya. Why is the barge on the Jordan? Why is that makabel tama? Mifnei shemamalin oisa pera oisa meichlin, because you fill it up with fruits and with produce and with food. Oisa min hayam. When in Vasha in the water, and it goes to the dry land, but Vasha liyam, it goes from dry land to the water, and because it's like that, it's like a big keli, it goes from dry to wet, so therefore it's makabel tuma. And yet another thing Rav Chani ben Antignas expounded was cher yois shegdan bein l'chshira bein lahaylan and tzrochen kishor. Branches that were date palm, whether they were harvested for climbing or for roofing, they require tying. You still got to tie them off before you use them for muksa. So we brought this down not because of the makabel tuma of the barge, but because on the show that if you want to use the branch of date palm on Shabbos, you have to tie them down. You don't got to get rid of the thorns, but you have to tie them down to show that now you're using them and it's not going to be muksa on Shabbos. But since we brought this up about the barge and the makabel tuma, we have to ask a question. Hasivain, but they challenged. Hare Nidarya, the Ashkelon, but you also have a barge in Ashkelon. How come that one no one ever asked whether it's makabel tuma? Ari Yitzchak bar Lazar, he says Shanya it's different because that one never comes fully onto the ground. It's the ships that are partially on the bank and partially in the water. Apparently, the Jordan barge is different, where it comes completely onto ground, loaded up, then it gets pushed into the water, and then it gets pulled onto the ground, the other side, and then it gets unloaded. Isa Deri Baruch Hanak Rabbi Chanina. So this accords with the review that the Mar of Chanina, that what did he report? That Eilen Hayinu Im Rebbe Lachamar Grar, that we were studying together with Rabbi of Chamas Gerar, V'haya Aimer Lanu, and he said to us, Bacharu lachem chalkei avanim, select for yourselves smooth stones, v'atem mutrim l'talton l'machar. And if you select them, then you could use them on Shabbos. It's not going to mix up. Rabbi Zera Amar ad shikardem, until you chisel them. You make a small chisel and mark them, and that's enough, and then it's no longer mix up. Chavrei Amar ad sheyishaf safe. The friends of the scholars would say, until one wipes them clean, at least clean them, show that you're going to use them, that's enough. The people from Sipayra say, so long as you designate them mentally. Rabbi Yochanan Omer ad sheyalehem tayar kli. Rabbi Yochanan says we make them into a kli. So what is it we find with all these different views of how to use muksa? We find that Asher Chas, that Amar, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yonasan Chada, they both say the same thing. Rav Ze'era, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yosi Chada, they all say the same thing. Tzipayre, Rabbi Yosi, Ben Shov, Rabbi Chalafta, Ben Shol Chada, they all say the same thing. And Chavrei Le Lahain Zug. But the friends of the scholars, they do not have anyone to go with. So what's the different levels of preparing something for muksa? Either mentally, or you have to do a small act to prepare them, or you have to change them into a kli. Those are the different shittas of creating an object that was muksa, or generally would be muksa on Shabbos, and now you're allowed to use it on Shabbos. Zok the next halacha. Imlai kisahu b'yom. If you not cover up a pot of hot food when it was still day, when it's still Friday, lo yichsanu mishashechach. You cannot cover it when it's dark. Kisahu v'neglas muter l'kasoi. If you cover it with insulation and it got undone, then you could redo it. Memale as hatzika, and when we fill a bottle, the nice tachas akar or tachas hakeses, or place it under a cushion or a bolster. It doesn't say whether it's hot water or cold water. Either way, whether you're trying to insulate the bottle, whether you're trying to give heat to something else, that you're allowed to do. Not like by dime. The pot was, instead it was still day Friday, magzor by dime. So if you have a pot of food that's cooked for still Friday, and you take it off while it's still Friday, you're allowed to put it on while it's still Friday. Not like mishchecha. If you took it after it got dark, magzor mishchecha, you return after it got dark. Not like by yom, the kadesh olav hayom. What happens? You moved it when it was still day, still Friday, and then the day got sanctified. It came Shabbos. Now, could you return the pot? We'll answer. First of that, we had that question of several blot ago, and we're going to answer the question again with different svaras. We'll have a similar question coming up. Rabba b'shem Rabbi Huda. If the cavity where you were insulating the pot that got all mishkababel got deranged, it is forbidden then to return it. Umekira kira mutter, you're allowed to transfer a hot pot from one hot kira to another hot kira. You're not stopping in between. Min hahu demar Rabbi Lezer b'shem Rabbi Shia. That Meishare Saisa es Rabbi Chia Hagadol, Aisa ten Rabbi Chia Hagadol, the Haisa Male Loichamin, and I would bring him up hot water from a low floor to another floor, and then return it to Akira. Right? We've had this Gemara before again, and we said because he probably never put it down. My Rabbi Yomi Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yomi says, "Afilo Makira Shavlo Muat, Lakira Shalom Mutar." Even from a cool Akira to a hot Akira is permissible, so long as it's a straight transfer and you never put it down, and so long as there was heat coming out of the cool Akira. It's cool, it's hot, but it's cooler than the hotter one. Also, all these things have to do with food, obviously, that was fully cooked before Shabbos, and food that has not cooled off in between. So transfer from one to the other and a straight transfer. Makira liftimna aser. From Makira to insulation, that is aser. Mitimna lakira aser. And from insulation to Akira, that's prohibited. Mitimna latimna tzricha. And from one insulation to another insulation, that's a tzarchim. So let's go through this. Why would it not be allowed from a kira to insulation? Because we're moving it from, you're afraid that you're moving it from the pot, but you're moving it to insulation, and that's only because you want to keep the food very warm, and therefore maybe you're afraid it's not very cooked, and vice versa. Obviously, from insulation to a kira, because you don't think the food is cooked enough or has to cook more, make it hotter, that's a problem. Insulation, if you're dealing with insulation that does not give any heat, so what are you doing? You're not really doing anything. You're taking it out of insulation, you're allowed to return it to the same insulation, so it's no different than turning to other insulation. If you talk about insulation does give heat, you can't do that anyway. You're not allowed to turn it, you're not allowed to put it in insulation that makes heat. So therefore, it must be that what really are you doing to going from insulation to insulation if you're allowed to take it out of one insulation and turn to other insulation also? The question, of course, is going to be is whether it's muksa, whether it was designated or not. So this is not necessarily a teku, a question that the Gemara can answer, but it requires investigation, and there are different svaras that we can work out. Obviously, we're not going to pass it on right now, but obviously the Gemara was wondering about these different considerations. Nigla memoid if a cup became uncovered while it was still day from its insulation, mikasa bagim, covered while it's still day. Nigla b'cheshecha, if it became uncovered after dark, machsei b'cheshecha, he may recover after dark. Nigla b'yom v'kadosh olav hayom, if it became uncovered while it was still day, and then all of a sudden it became Shabbos. So the Gemara does not answer that question. So now we could do them together. When you have a pot on a kira and it's taken off before Shabbos, you're allowed to put it back on Shabbos. Okay, that's fine. When it's taken off on Shabbos, what's the reason why you're allowed to put it back on Shabbos? Because A, it's a banked kira, so the kira is not increasing heat, and B, the food is already cooked. So therefore, you're going to return it to a kira that's already banked and shoveled on Shabbos, so that keeps diminishing heat. Meanwhile, you're putting it there to keep warm, but it's not going to do anything to your food more than it did already before we took it off. When you took it off, the kira on Shabbos, that was its maximum heat. The food was maximum heat and the kira was maximum heat. Since then, the food has gone down, the kira has gone down. So even though you're going to return to the kira, and the kira is going to still give warmth to the food, but it's not going to make it warm like it was before. Since it never reached warm before, so therefore you could say that you could do it. That's number one. That's one svar you could say that you could do it. When dealing with the same thing, when dealing with a pot that was uncovered from insulation while it's still day, okay, so then you cover it. And if it came uncovered on Shabbos, so then you let it cover it again. What happens if it came uncovered before a day? So both the kira and the insulation are the same thing. Was the food fully cooked? So if you already put it in insulation, then you're not worried about necessarily that it's, then we had this svar before. They're really not worried about necessarily that it's not going to be fully cooked because insulation doesn't cook. It's only going to keep it warm. So then think about it should be no problem. Here, you had it insulated before Shabbos, showing it was fully cooked. However, the insulation became uncovered, and you didn't have a chance to cover it before Shabbos. So now those two considerations don't apply. One, you had it fully cooked before Shabbos. That's not a problem. And number two, how busy are you going to be with it to mishir? If it was already covered, it got a little uncovered, you're just covering it over. It's not a big deal. It sounds like you could just recover it. Tane, we turn to Brisa. Ein time din chamin mechashecha. When I insulate hot food after nightfall, aval moisvin alehen ksos v'chelim. But we may add clothing and utensils on top of it to add the insulation. How much must there be of the pot, the admissible to cover it? Reb Zrikan b'sher chanina afilu mappa. Even a thin cloth suffices as long as that's there. Then you can add to it. Amar Rab Zera says, provided that the first installation is something that actually is effective in being insulation. If it's not, then you're not adding anything. You're creating. So if you're adding, that's fine, but you can't create insulation. Amar Rab says, Kal Dvar Mailin. Everything really is effective, even if it's very, very thin. Amar Rav Masnia, he says, Vayus, and it is well understood that Ilu Man Dinasav Martov v'yahav le reisha b'shas sinsa, that if one were to take a rag and put it on his head during a cold, dilma law kavish sinsa, would it perhaps not lessen the cold? Of course it would. So cloths, of course, can go ahead and the help with insulation. Kishem she'ein taimnin chamin mechashecha, just like you may not insulate hot food after nightfall, so too you may not insulate snow or cold. That's according to Rabbanan, because you've been so involved, you're going to miss a share. Red matter matters it because he's not worried about missing the share. Hasir Shmuel bar Abba ad Hada Kamai. So Shmuel bar Abba regarding the first opinion. But we learned in the Mishnah, the Malehu Adam ad Hakitain shall Mayim v'Naisein Tachas Akar Oy Tachas Hakesas. A person may fill a bottle with water and place it under a cushion or under a seat on Shabbos. Elak Rabbi. This is supposed to be Rabbi Matzah, because Rabbi Matzah is right. So kan desha kan lahashais. There's a short while. Here's a long while. So what does it mean? Does it mean leaving the bottle is a long while, or leaving the bottle is a short while and the snow is a long while? Or is it saying it takes? So again, we're considering the fact that we're gonna miss a share. Again, the consideration is missing a share. So if it takes a long time to do it, so yes, that's why you're missing a share. Throwing a bottle under a cushion is not going to make you miss a share. So if you're allowed to do it, if you're talking about actually insulating, the problem is keeping something cold on Shabbos, when the opposite of heat, then it's a different svar altogether, and then it's a chiddush and something else new. Hadrulach, b'ma taimnin hadrulach, we'll turn to you, ma taimnin will turn to you. Perek, hey. So halacha starts. B'meh behema yotzin, with what may an animal go out in public? So a person may not do malach on Shabbos, and a person's animal may not do malach on Shabbos. So the Gemara is asking, what may an animal go out with on Shabbos that it does not violate the violation of carrying? What is its clothing, in other words, and what is not its clothing? What cannot go out with? Yoitze hagamal be'efsar, a camel go out with a halter, the hanaka be'hatam, and a naka with a nose ring, the livdikas be'purmdwa, and a livdikas and a bit, the hasus b'sher, and a horse with a collar, the chol bale hasher yoitze b'sher nishachin b'sher. All animals that wear a collar may go out with a collar, and they may also be pulled by the collar. Mazin alehem, and one may sprinkle upon the collars. The toivlin kaimun, and one may also immerse them in their place on the animal's neck. I'm going to find out what these things mean. And what may an animal go out? And what may an animal not go out? So the Gemara. He taught Mikhail his father, Arba behemais nimshachais be'ayifsar. 4 animals are pulled by their halter. These are them. Hasus, a horse. Va'pered, a mule. A gamal, a camel. V'chamor, and a donkey. Amar Rab Chizkiah. Rab Chizkiah says, V'simona. And the mnemonic to remember this is V'chein tia magefa hasus hapered agamal v'chamar. The pasuk, it says, and similarly, will be a plague on the horse, the mule, the camel, and the donkey. That's how you remember these animals. And that pasuk is from Zechariah. Marav says, Halach Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yosi. Halach is according to Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yosi that a horse may go out. With a halter on Shabbos. Live the kas. What's a live the kas? This is an iron bit. Is tane ledkas? There's a tane that says it's the ledkas. Man ledkas. What is the etymology of the ledkas? Maybe that's a Greek word, possible, or a Latin word. Ad shem luvim hushim b'mitzadav, in accordance with the Libyans, the Cushites, and their footsteps. And it said the opinion, man da amar ladkas. What is a ladkas? Avtim. He says that it's an avabtim. Ma avabtim. Chamar salak, a tall donkey. Rabbi Yonah says, Rav Yeshua boy, and Rav Yeshua inquires, Gerim habaim miluvi, that converts or aliens that originate from Libya, ma lahamtin laham shleisha dairis. What is the law regarding waiting 3 generations and to marry into the congregation? And we'll find out the answer on the next Amud.